Over the past 2 months, I have trained the world's smartest ants to solve different puzzles. Today, they will prove their intelligence across 5 different tests. To start, we're going to try and trick them. I've trained them to only eat from this blue bowl. Today, I'm giving them a choice, their blue bowl or a red one. I'll test if they chose the blue bowl to eat, because that is the only place they'll get their dinner. No ways! She's going straight to the blue. That is insane! That is insane. However, our ants could have literally just got lucky. So let's try to trick them and swap the bowls around. Okay, so now we gotta gaslight them real quick. Because by now, our ants might just be following pheromone trails. Look, here she comes. Now let's see if she chooses red or blue. No ways! She chose blue again. That is insane. And as it turns out, it doesn't matter how many times I swap and clean their bowls. Our ants choose the blue bowl every single time. In fact, out of all the tests I did, the only time they even looked at the red bowl was after they had already checked the blue one. Which is super important for the next few puzzles. However, we have just proved that they actually aren't using pheromones, like I mentioned earlier. The thing is, most ants are basically blind and use their antennae and pheromone trails to get around. Yet, our ants have really good eyesight compared to the majority of antes and can actually see colors and shapes.
So, when we swap their bowls around, our ants aren't following a scent trail that would lead them to the wrong side.
They actually look for their blue bowl because they remember it. But of course, we can't talk about their memory without testing that too. And honestly, this next puzzle is my favorite. Watching ants solve a maze is always interesting. But seeing them solve it using only their memory is going to be insane.
So for this puzzle, we've given them 3 paths. This one is the shortest and leads straight to their food.
This one also leads to their food, but it is really long, and this one is a trap. Now, although this girl has already started exploring the shortest path, she's about to show us another layer to her intelligence.
You see, not only are these girls smart, but they are also massive.
It takes 3 months of resources to grow an ant this big, and our girl here knows her worth. So, after exploring a bit and finding nothing interesting, she decides to turn around and check a new path. But of course, she falls for the trap. However, this is when she realizes that being out in a new place might not be worth the risk, and turns around to find her sisters. She knows that wandering around blindly wastes energy and risks her life. And seeing as the colony just had sugar water in the last puzzle, she needs to find out if they actually want more food. And as it turns out, the answer is yes. And so, she turns around more motivated than before, and explores the one path she hasn't been down yet. And this time, she doesn't give up, because she has a new goal. She pushes through the longest part of the maze, finds her food, and chooses the blue bowl, of course. However, on her way back, she doesn't follow a pheromone trail like other ants would. Instead, she explores a bit of this path and remembers that it is actually the quickest way home. Now guys, in just one puzzle, she has shown us risk assessment, communication, path optimization, and probably a whole bunch of other things I didn't notice. And of course, all these girls are just as smart. and they all eventually figure out their favorite path. However, I've added in some landmarks to help them memorize the maze better. Because as they start getting full of food, they stop using the maze to save their energy, and we're going to test that memory again in the next few puzzles. Yet, this doesn't mean they don't care about the maze anymore. In fact, it's probably the opposite, which is exactly what we are about to test in the next puzzle: the blockage. You see, our ANTs have learned that they get food at the blue bowl. But what will they do if they can't get there anymore? Will they remove the blockage, seeing as they are so strong? Or will they just ignore it because they are full and don't need any more food? Well, as it turns out, this ANT species is extremely sensitive to vibrations and are very territorial with their nest. So the moment I touch this pipe to block it off, they feel it instantly, and a scout immediately comes up to see what just happened. But as she gets here, she realizes that the only entrance and exit to their nest is now blocked. And the colony is basically trapped, so she rushes back to alert the colony.
And then returns to rip the cotton apart with those strong jaws of hers.
Not only are these girls extremely smart, but they also have one of the strongest bites in the ANT kingdom.
In fact, they have the highest torque-to-body ratio of any ant.
Which means that if something gets in the way of them and keeping the colony safe, they will literally rip that thing apart or die trying. And this is exactly what our girls do. Damn, that's insane. Look how they're dragging it around. What? Now guys, there's something I haven't told you yet. Unlike most ANTs, this species of ANT, Camponotus singularis, are more like lone wolves than a normal ANT. They each travel hundreds of meters, entirely alone, navigating through complex forests and climbing massive trees. Which is a huge reason why their eyesight and memory is so good. Which is why watching them solve these puzzles is quite amazing.
But also, kind of sad. Ants this smart shouldn't be living in a boring plastic box.
Which is why I have got them this.
If they are able to get through the final puzzle today, they'll discover this waiting for them. And we'll get to watch our colony trade their plastic world for the one thing they've never seen before.
Real clay and sand so they can expand their nest and dig for the first time ever.
However, they still have 2 more puzzles to pass before they move into their new nest.
And seeing as they've just had to demolish this blockage, they've now got to build something instead.
You see, only 1% of animals on Earth use tools, like chimps, crows, dolphins, and obviously, humans.
But there are some ANTs that do it too. And one tool they use is sand to cover up sticky surfaces.
Or even soak up nectar like a sponge to carry back to the colony.
So, let's find out what our clever girls will do if they get caught in Vaseline.
If they want to get across to their food bowl, they'll need to use some of this cotton they've ripped up, some shredded tiles, or some wood shavings to get across.
Seeing as they are carpenter ANTs, damn, the whole gang's here. Let's see if we can do this without getting bit.
Damn, she's keen. Look at her go. Straight in. Damn, she's keen. Look at her go. Straight in.
But obviously, this girl remembers exactly where her food is and speedruns the maze quicker than I can set up my phone.
However, with a thick layer of Vaseline between her and the bowl, let's see how she reacts. Oh, she is so keen. She saw the blue bowl and she immediately runs over.
Okay, she doesn't really care. And now she's on her way back to tell all her sisters.
And while she's gone, we're going to try and make that a bit more difficult. That was way too easy. Now guys, I've got some fly paper and of course some super glue. That we can try and make it sticky for them. But I am not going to use that stuff because I think it's a bit too dangerous.
I obviously don't want to hurt them. Now, seeing as they passed that twice, let's move on to the final test. And honestly, this one's going to be the most insane one yet. For their final puzzle, our girls need to cross the floating maze. But to cross this, they'll first need to study the two different paths and figure out which one to take. And then fully commit to it. The 3D maze is more stable, but not only will they need to stretch across this gap and risk falling to get on, but they'll also need to deal with the constant dead ends in every single direction.
All while building a 3D map in their head of the path to take back. However, they could choose the more direct path, but then they'll need to dangle on loose thread to get across and not lose their footing. And of course, they'll still need to cross all the other puzzles from today and then do it all again to get back to the nest.
As our first girl arrives to see what was causing all the vibrations in her pipe, she can clearly tell that things are different here.
And starts tapping around with her antennae to figure out what exactly those changes are.
However, she's really curious to know where this stick leads to, so by using her antennae to measure the distance, she learns that it is just far enough that it...
And that's even while I'm adjusting the distances to make it possible, but still difficult.
Yet, she quickly learns that it is too shaky for her big body, and quickly climbs back to the safety of the tube. And after letting her sisters know that something has changed in their territory, she comes back to commit to her choice. It's always insane to see how strong ANTS are. Imagine pulling yourself across a ledge that is as long as you are.
By your fingertips and toes and not falling. Yeah, I could never do that.
Regardless, our girl starts to explore all these different paths, and every single twist and turn is added to the 3D map in her head.
So that she can navigate her way back home. Yet, while she's exploring, one of the sisters comes out to see the new part of their home that our girl mentioned to her.
And decides to jump onto the stick path too. It's kind of insane to see just how quickly information actually passes around in the colony.
Soon enough, all the ANTS will be easily crossing these sticks to get to their food. However, it seems like our girl over here has actually got stuck because she hasn't really moved from this area for a while.
But then she does something that reminds me a lot of us humans. Instead of just forcing herself to keep going and getting more lost, she turns around and goes back to the start of the path, kind of to restart it. But this time, she avoids the direction that got her lost the first time.
And as it turns out, resetting her 3D map like that has paid off perfectly for her.
Because she's gone directly towards the only path to the next puzzle. And of course, she breezes through all of them as they always do. However, she still needs to fill up on sugar water and deliver it back to the colony by following the 3D map she made in her head, backwards. And after a few minutes of filling up, it's time to see just how well that 3D map works. As she climbs back onto the path, she immediately starts heading in the right direction. But of course, she does get a little bit confused on some of the turns here. But guys, honestly, I get confused about when to turn, even with Google Maps telling me what to do. So I don't blame her for taking a wrong turn every now and then. But she always knows to turn around and find the correct path anyways.
And so, after a few minutes of this, she's made her way back to the tube and runs down to feed the colony.
Now guys, as we have seen, our ANTs are quite nervous about being out of their nest for too long.
So I have actually attached their reward, their new nest, directly to their pipe. Hopefully they choose to move into it.
And don't feel too scared or vulnerable if they do it, seeing as it is so much closer now. Training these ANTS was super difficult and it took ages to pull this video off.